evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Network 216 production of the Faithful Dogs podcast. I am Tyler Johnson, joined as always by Mr. Jack Robinson. Jack, my man, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, man. It's beautiful outside. And obviously we have great Browns news with the draft, coming and going.
Yep, it's finally something because it seems like we really haven't gotten any news at this point. But the NFL draft is done and dusted. It feels like the time comes so quick every year, and then again, it's 3 days and it's over. But there's plenty to discuss tonight. Thankfully, there's something to discuss tonight. But if you guys are really excited for some more Cleveland Browns content, drop a like on that video. What that does, that YouTube algorithm really helps push that content out to other viewers that have not yet seen the Faithful Dogs podcast. So again, drop that like, subscribe if you are brand new to the channel, as we are on the push for 3,000 subscribers, and we are getting there quickly. We're almost about 400 away. So it seems like a lot, but it's really not. And you guys can help us hopefully get that goal before this football season. We really would appreciate that. So, Jack, first off, before we talk about the players that the Browns actually drafted, are you surprised this is the first year Andrew Berry has stuck and made every pick in the selection that the Browns had? He didn't trade up. He didn't trade down. Did that surprise you at all?
I mean, I guess you could say it surprised me just because, like you said, we've gotten so used to him either, wanting to trade down because, he values getting some extra picks, or, maybe he does see a guy that he wants to hop up and grab at a position where he thinks that it's worth more than the picks that he currently has in his arsenal. And I guess I could say that I am surprised, but at the same time, I don't think that the Browns at this current moment we're really in need of either of the two extremes. I think their roster is good enough where they didn't really need to jump up to find a player, like a big splash player, at any particular spot in the draft. And I also don't think that they were looking for an exceptional amount of depth at multiple key positions to the point where they would want to trade back and get extra picks in the middle rounds. I think that they're at a point now where they can kind of just let the draft fall to them and then just kind of take the best guy available at each individual position. So it's surprising just because, we're used to him doing that. But in terms of just the strength of the roster and how that correlates to the way that he looks at the draft, I think that it makes sense.
I think the reason I'm surprised is that you just didn't have many picks in this draft. So my thought was, why not, if anything, trade up? Because the value later in the draft just isn't. It's not a draft that had a lot of depth. It really wasn't. Like, don't get me wrong, there were some guys still there on day 3, and you're like, okay, well, how did this guy fall this far and whatnot? I mean, because there are every year. But as far as overall depth in this draft, I don't know, man. I just was like, that one surprised me a little bit. And then I think what also surprised me, the fact he made 2 picks in the 7th round, really shocked me. Like, I did not think whatsoever that he was going to pick in the 7th round, because he doesn't do that. Andrew Berry does not pick in the 7th round, because what he normally does is he trades out of those picks so he can get a head start on undrafted free agents. So that definitely surprised me, because, again, I think also trying to get more picks for 2025 is something he would have liked to do. I did find it interesting that he mentioned, maybe it wasn't him, might have been assistant GM Glenn Cook, after they made their first pick. It sounds like they had an offer on the table that they liked, but they liked the player better. I thought that was interesting, because we've seen in the past where the Browns trade down, in that type of situation, especially with not having many picks. And what did they do? They stayed right there. So, yeah, definitely a little bit of surprise. So now we'll go into the first guy. Talked about it a little bit last night on the Scarlet and Gray podcast. Again, for those of you that aren't familiar, we cover Ohio State football year round. Even talk some basketball from time to time, not on the show, but just on Twitter, because we don't know enough about the basketball team. But anyway, kind of broke this down a little bit. Jack, I'll let you have the floor, because, I mean, I said a lot the other night, but there's not a better fit for a guy like Michael Hall Jr., 20 years old, defensive tackle. So just endless potential that he has, going to a place where Myles Garrett is here, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Darius Smith, and most importantly, Jim Schwartz.
Mm-hmm.
What were your thoughts on this selection? I know some people thought that I'm not going to mention names because I saw a ton of people mention it. They're not going to take a D tackle because they have Ika, they have Hurst, and they're going to have to cut somebody. But what were your thoughts on this pick?
I thought that this was a very logical pick. I think a lot of people were really curious about which direction they were going to go. Like, obviously the linebacker room needed some help. People were thinking maybe we needed another one because obviously you lose 2 in the offseason. Maybe you get another safety. Maybe you do the Andrew Berry thing where you go and get another cornerback, as he's prone to do with Greg Newsome having obviously his 5th-year option coming up. They did claim it today. So it's one of those things where, they really did have a decent amount of options. I think everyone had a pretty good suspicion it was going to be a defensive pick. And I think that D tackle, I know a lot of people are saying, Siaki Ika, what are you doing with him? What are you doing with all these other guys that you already have in that room? The thing is that you can't have enough depth. And the fact that Siaki Ika didn't play at all or really any meaningful amount of time last season, and that you did have some, injury issues on the line, it shows that you can never have enough depth, especially at that D tackle position. And I think that if you get a guy like Mike Hall, who obviously he's a great player. He's from the Ohio State University, a local kid. And I think a lot of people like it for that reason, but also because I think, like you said, he fits very well into this scheme. He's going to have a lot of opportunities to be able to really make an impact. And I think he's in probably one of the best situations just in terms of the fact that he's going to have a lot of opportunity to play. He's going to have a lot of guys who are taking the heat off him, and he's going to be able to do what he does best, which is disrupt the middle. And I think that that's really all they're looking for, is to be able to really develop him alongside that whole room of DTs and edges, especially with Myles still there. So I think it's a great pick. I know that a lot of people might be confused just because of the fact that we have a lot of D tackles, but it's kind of like when you have a lot of good corners, it's like you can never have enough good D tackles. You never have enough depth at that position because, especially for the Browns, the run game last year up the middle was an issue, and not getting enough pressure up the middle was an issue. So if they want to keep tackling it through the draft and trying to find talented guys who can, kind of fulfill the need of getting a true defensive tackle who can disrupt the run and maybe get some pressure on the quarterback up the middle, then I'm all for it. And a guy like Mike Hall, I feel like, has a lot of potential to be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like I said, I love the pick personally. You have the potential here with Mike Hall to find your version of Christian Wilkins, to find he's got the potential that he has is truly next level. I mean, he should have come back for another year at Ohio State. I'm just going to say that. He didn't, due to the fact that he had his first child. I completely understand. If he comes back to Ohio State on that defense, he's probably a first-round pick next year. Just saying. So being able to get him where they did, a no-brainer for the Browns. I'm still surprised by it, just given the depth. The depth you have at D tackle, because now you have a tough decision coming up. Jack, who's the odd man out in the defensive tackle room? It's not Shelby Harris. It's not Dalvin Tomlinson. Mike Hall obviously is a guaranteed roster spot. Siaki Ika or Maurice Hurst. And then here's the other part to this. We haven't seen enough of Siaki Ika to even know. The Browns are the only ones that are going to know this. We don't.
Yeah, it is kind of a difficult prospect. I mean, it's like Siaki didn't get really a chance to do anything. But we don't know if that's because of just, any sort of, outside thing. Was he just not good enough to make the rotation? Was there injury issues? I think that was a big thing, especially during the offseason. I think that he was dealing with some injury problems. And it really is going to become like a question, I think, probably throughout all of the offseason and probably throughout training camp. Like, is Siaki Ika going to be able to, carve out a niche for himself on this team? Because like you said, a lot of those guys are basically guaranteed roster spots. Like, you're not going to be seeing a lot of these guys even in discussion to get cut. The only guys who are guys like Mo Hurst, but Mo Hurst had a fantastic season last year. He came back this offseason from free agency. So obviously the Browns really liked him. I think that it's going to really come down to just how, does Siaki Ika improve enough during this offseason and show enough that the Browns feel like he's worth the investment over one of these guys who have proven it throughout the entirety of last year on that really, really historic defense that they had. I think it might kind of play out almost where like last year where we thought like the Browns were going to, cut one of their, more rookie receivers, whether, is it going to be David Bell? Is David Bell going to make it? Or are some of these other guys going to make it? And they might end up, somehow, cutting a position that you didn't expect to keep them all just because they like the depth, they like everyone there, and they don't want to cut a guy that they know can give them good play. But really it's gonna come down to how do these guys play in preseason, how do these guys progress throughout the offseason training camp. So if I had to guess, I would say that the only guy that really doesn't fit the bill is Siaki Ika, but I also don't really know if I see Andrew Berry cutting him after one season when he was a rookie, and it was kind of a weird situation regarding like injury and other sort of stuff that we don't really know everything about in terms of like his production.
Yeah, I think with Siaki Ika, I mean, there was a picture the other day I saw post. He looks a lot leaner, which is kind of good. I think that's only going to help with his mobility. Yeah, I don't know what position you're taking from if you're going to keep that 5D tackles, though, is the only thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that does play out, for sure. Now, moving on, the Browns in the third round drafted Michigan, funny enough, Michigan guard Zach Zinter. Really good football player. He suffered a really bad injury this past year, but it sounds like, I mean, by all accounts, he's going to be good to go. I mean, he suffered a broken tibia and fibia in Michigan's win over Ohio State. But, I mean, this is a guy that one of the best in the Big Ten. He's allowed 5 quarterback hurries all year last year. He's a really good football player. He's a bigger guard. He's 6'6". Personally, I like this pick. I think there were some other linemen they could have potentially looked at, but that said, I'm pretty content with this pick, and you got to start drafting for the future. Wyatt Teller probably is last year here. Let's call it what it is. I said that with another Browns player we really love, and I hope I'm wrong, but and then we don't know Joel Petonio, man. There's the realistic possibility. I'm not saying this happens, that you're without Wyatt Teller and Joel Petonio after this year. It's not a shock if that happens. So what are your thoughts on this pick? I think it's a good pick. You also have a guy that has a ton of experience, and I think if he had to come in and play right away, he could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in my group chat with a couple of my friends, and we right when this pick happened, I was like, this is the Wyatt Teller replacement plan. Like after this year, this is going to be Zach Zinter's job. Like I think that's really the contingency here. And I think it's a really good pick. I mean, remember last year he was fantastic in every single game that he played against Ohio State. As much as I hated it, he was very, very good. And I think that the reason why he was picked at this position, I heard some people saying that it seemed like picking him this high when he was injured. I think that he would have gone higher if he wasn't injured. Obviously, I think if he had played those last 8 games, he would have been a higher round pick. And I think that's why Andrew Berry liked him at that position, just because he was a very high prospect as a guard, and because of an injury, which is not a serious injury that he can't come back from at all, and they're not expecting him to start right away. It's a very good investment plan for a very high quality guard. And I think, just like what you said, like they got to start looking towards the future at the offensive line. And, obviously Joel Petonio and Wyatt Teller are the first 2 guys who you have to start looking at. And I think Zach Zinter, I mean, the guy I'm pretty sure he was a captain over at Michigan. I mean, the whole team loved him. They rallied around him. He's clearly a guy with great character. And I think that he's going to be a perfect fit on this line. Clearly, this line is, I mean, you still have, Bill Callahan's not here anymore, but you still have, a bunch of great stand-up guys and a bunch of great guys in the locker room who are going to be able to lead this offensive line moving forward. And I think that Zach Zinter is probably going to be a centerpiece once, Wyatt Teller moves on after this season, or at least that's the assumption.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jacob, I mean, it pains me to say it, but I'll say this: Michigan develops good offensive linemen.
They do.
I'm just going to say it. Like Jim Harbaugh did a great job. I could say that now that he's gone. But yeah, so I love the Zach Zinter pick. It's kind of hard for me to hate that pick. I'll admit I didn't really know a lot about him, or if he'd even be on our radar, especially due to age and then injury and whatnot. But I mean, you make a good point, Jack. I think you get a steal at that pick because you have a guy coming off an injury. And given how good he is, he probably goes a lot higher if he's healthy.
Yeah.
Okay. Now moving on. This is where I'm not hating on a guy to hate. There were just other options I would have preferred personally. So the Browns in the 5th round, they pick in the 3rd, and then so they pick at 85, and then they don't pick again till 156 in the 5th round, which again just surprised me. I thought they would try and do something because Troy Franklin was still there, who they really liked. There were some guys there that they liked, like that they've had in for visits and whatnot, that were there, and they just held firm, which is fine. Jamari Thrash out of Louisville. This is a guy that doesn't wow you by any means. I mean, if you look at his numbers, he had this past year for Louisville, 63 passes, 858 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 carry for 12 yards and a touchdown. His drop percentage isn't great, but that doesn't worry me because it sounds like he was playing through basically a broken arm last year. And if you're a wide receiver playing through a broken arm, man, come on. It's gonna affect you. I'm pretty sure it's a broken arm. Might have been broken hand. I'm not exactly sure which
would be
one.
Even crazier.
If it was a broken hand. Exactly. But the reason, Jack, I'm not a huge fan of this, I'm not here to say he's going to be as good as his dad, but when you have the bloodlines of Jerry Rice, I'm taking a chance with Brendan Rice. I thought that was a no-brainer. He checked analytically. If you look at the criteria the last couple of years that Andrew Berry's drafted by based on age, athleticism profile, and production, he checks those boxes. So I would have taken him. I know they had Malik Washington, the wide receiver out of Virginia, in for a top 30 visit. He was still there. And I thought, if anything, you go receiver, he's the guy. They didn't take him either. I'm not – Jamari Thrash might be a stud for all I know, but it's just – there's other guys I liked there. I know he has inside-out versatility, could play inside, could play outside. He's got speed, 4.4 speed. Again, not my favorite pick. I get it, but what were your thoughts on this pick, Jack?
Yeah, I was confused too. I think, oddly enough, I had a lot of people in my group chats and stuff wanting Blake Corum. Then obviously Blake Corum went right before this pick, and they could have gone for him. Everyone thought, oh well, that's probably who the Browns are going to go for whatever reason. They thought they were going to go for Blake Corum in the 5th round. I wasn't really sure where they were going, but I mean, like you said, you see Rice up there, you see Washington up there, you see these guys who the Browns have had interest in and clearly had interest in. Jamari Thrash, I don't remember that hearing a lot about them, seeing him as a high prospect that they wanted to take. So yeah, just like you, I was expecting, because again, they were available, and those were guys who obviously a lot of people had high expectations of for a 5th round pick to have a pretty decent, trajectory, pretty decent prospect. And for them to go Jamari Thrash, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't that surprised, because it always seems like there's one random player that Andrew Berry just falls in love with that no one has heard of and has no reason to believe that he would pick at the position that he does. I mean, just look at some of these other wide receivers that he's picked in the 3rd round specifically. I don't want to say any names, but I mean, and I'm not saying that Jamari is going to be Anthony Schwartz. Okay. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it seems like this is a pattern that Andrew Berry kind of has, is that he kind of finds a guy that, maybe isn't the one that everyone's talking about, isn't the one that's kind of hyped up, even though, I mean, these guys are 5th round picks. People aren't really getting super hyped up about the 5th round pick wide receivers, but it's just I feel like he's going for the safest, most middle of the road option rather than going for the big swing, who knows what's possible guy. So I mean, I don't hate it, because I don't know Jamari Thrash. I don't know, how he can possibly turn out. I haven't seen all the tape on him. I haven't seen, what Andrew Berry's seen. But at the same time, it's when you have guys who you've already invested time into in terms of bringing them in for meetings, and they're clearly prospects that other teams are looking at in terms of just what everyone else is saying. I feel like those are the guys that you would want to go for in the 5th round when you don't have a lot of picks. You want to go for the guys who are either home run hits, or they're just, they burn out, because most of the time 5th round picks burn out. And I mean, it's because can Jamari Thrash maybe be a home run that no one saw? Sure. But is he more likely to be a home run or a strikeout? We don't know. So it's confusing. I mean, I don't like it just because those guys who were possible home runs and were maybe more likely home runs are there. But I also don't know enough about Jamari Thrash to really have an opinion on it. So like I'm gonna say just if I'm saying negative or positive, I'm gonna say just negative.
I think again for me, man, the biggest thing is like, and people need to understand. I'm not saying he's Jerry Rice. I'm not saying he's going to be that. I'm taking the bloodlines though. I'm
Yeah.
taking the guy that's been mentored, and that's his dad. That's mentored and trained by a Hall of Fame NFL wide receiver. Instead, you let Jim Harbaugh get him.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really understand that one. Really, so now moving on here, Jack. The Browns then selected. We only have two more picks here to discuss. They selected. My bad, three more picks. They selected linebacker Nathaniel. Let me make sure I'm going in the right order here because I am.
You're right.
Okay. The Browns website was a little hard to follow. Nathaniel Watson out of Mississippi State. This is a guy that has been an SEC, all SEC performer, 377 total tackles in 6 seasons, 35 for loss, 21 sacks, 2 interceptions. I mean, really good player. Finalist for the Buckus Award last year. He was also a third-team All-American. Had a DUI. Maybe that's the reason he slipped. What are your thoughts on this pick?
I think that this is just a solid Andrew Berry, find a guy who just has all the intangibles in terms of like, he's clearly a very good linebacker. He clearly has the recognition of the SEC in terms of like, I mean, he was a finalist for the Buckus Award. He has all those like stats and counting numbers that you want to see from a linebacker. And obviously a linebacker is a position of need in terms of depth for the Browns. So yeah, I mean, could it be that his draft stock went down because of the DUI? I would assume that probably is a good assumption. But I think that this is just one of those things where Andrew Berry looks at it again and says, hey, this is a guy who probably, again, had he not had that mark or stain on his record, he probably would be a higher pick, and he's getting him in the 6th round. It's a value proposition that I think he couldn't pass up. And I think that he got it because he saw that he was probably one of the best linebacker prospects at that position in the draft. So I think it's a good pick. I think it's a solid pick. And obviously it's a guy that you probably really need, considering that you are kind of, running low on linebackers that you can consistently play with the departure of 2 of our main ones in the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not against this pick. Like I said, when you get in the late in the draft, man, like if you can find someone, great. Let's call it what it is. It's normally a crapshoot.
Yeah,
if I'm
you're
being
taking
honest,
a shot.
like,
You're taking a shot in the dark.
Andrew Berry has done well later in the draft. I mean, he's found guys. Donovan Peoples-Jones is one. I know fans are still upset about that one. But still, it's kind of hard to really complain too much about guys this late. But it is what it is. So moving on, we'll talk about the last 2 guys. Not a lot, just because I'm going to be real. I don't really know much about these guys.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest with people here. Miles Harden, cornerback out of South Dakota. First time Andrew Berry's taken a player from the FCS rankings. 46 total tackles, 1 fumble recovery, 2 passes defended, 1 interception. This is a guy probably you're looking at to play nickel. What were your thoughts? Are you surprised Andrew Berry took another corner?
No, of course not. Hey, look, Andrew Berry says you can never have enough corners. And the thing is, it's one of those things where, I mean, you say he wants to play nickel. I mean, who's to say halfway through the season they don't, maybe try to move off of Greg Newsome and try to maybe slot Miles Harden in there, or maybe just get him some reps, because they like to move their corners around. They like to get guys in and out. So, I mean, I think, get more corners, get more guys that can maybe have some high upside, and just get them in the rotation early, because who knows what they can become. I mean, you have a lot of guys on this team that are later round picks that have actually turned out. So I think that this is, but again, it's also one of those things where it's like, it's just another crapshoot. It's like when you're in the 7th round, you're just like, you know what, let's just find guys and let's see if they can work out. Like if a 7th round pick can become like a consistent rotational player, that's a win. So like, if that's all you're really looking for from Miles Harden, then I think that, it's probably a decent pick for Andrew Berry, just because I feel like he's pretty spot on when it comes to drafting corners.
Yeah, listen, I'm not gonna act like I know anything about him because I don't. So
Yeah,
it's hard for me. He knows what he's doing when he drafts corners. So who am I? Who am I to judge? Like honestly, who am I to judge? He's proven so far that whatever corner he drafts just turns to gold for him.
yeah, exactly.
So it seems like we're good there. Now, really, the last guy, another guy, I honestly don't know much about. Drafted 2 defensive. I don't know. I mean, Juwan Briggs, they drafted out of Cincinnati. In his career, he had 130 tackles, 14 and a half tackles for loss, 8 sacks. Team captain last year. Last year, he had 27 tackles, 6 for loss, 2 sacks over 12 starts. Earned all Big 12 honorable mention. I guess it's a flyer. I don't really understand that pick, to be honest.
This is an investment pick. This is a pick that they took to fill out the roster and for training camp, and then maybe they say, someone got hurt on someone else's squad, and they trade him for like a 6th. So or they do a pick swap where they get a little bit of extra value out of it. Like this is not. I don't think Jawan has a very good chance of making this roster. Maybe a practice squad if that's something that they want to do. This might be just a player that they drafted to have so that they could maybe try to incorporate him into a trade later on if an offensive lineman gets hurt or a defensive lineman gets hurt somewhere. Like there's some sort of reason that they took another defensive tackle. That's the only thing I can really think of, though.
I would have looked at Michael Pratt, quarterback out of Tulane. They brought him in for here's the thing I don't get, man, is like you bring guys in for top 30s. Michael Pratt was there, dude. Like you could, we don't need a quarterback, but you brought him in for a reason. So clearly you had interest. I was just surprised, but it is what it is. There is one UDFA I want to talk about just real quick here as we're wrapping things up. You add Jovian Cohen from Miami, guy who could play inside, another guard. Listen, they had a top 30 with him. I don't know why he slid. I wish I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a solid pickup by Andrew Berry right there. This is a guy that will be competing with Michael Dunn for a roster spot probably. Not only that, at the very least, he's probably going to make the practice squad. But if he plays well, then you might have to make a tough decision. What were your thoughts on that? I thought it was a great pickup. Really shocked he wasn't drafted. But, I mean, we'll take it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another one of those things where just Andrew Berry kind of gets his cake, gets to eat his cake and gets to make his cake and eat it too, where he gets to, take all these drafts and then still probably get a guy that he probably might have drafted had he not thought he was, going to go undrafted probably in the 7th round. Like it's just, he kind of gets to get all these extra guys on the team and then also, get first bidding on all these other guys who unfortunately didn't get drafted. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I think that if he does show out very well, I think Michael Dunn they might see him as a casualty of the roster restriction, because I think that if they're looking at it, like obviously Michael Dunn is a very well-known player amongst the team, and he has a lot of experience with this offensive line. But I think if you're looking at like who's more important for future proofing, they might want to get in a younger guy on a much more cheaper contract. Like, even though I don't think Michael Dunn's getting paid really all that much, but it's just get a young guy in who you obviously had interest in because you gave him a top 30 meeting, and kind of just, really start looking at how this offensive line is going to be moving into the future. Do we know who their offensive line coordinator is now, or do we not?
Yeah, it's Andy Dickerson.
Okay.
Dickinson. Yeah. From Seattle.
So I mean, I think that this move might have been made with him in mind too. Just like get new guys in that he can maybe have more control over than their progression. So I think it's a great move. I think that offensive line is one of those places where like you can never have enough prospects in, because if one of them turns out being really good, then you want to make sure you have them at the ground level.
You know what? Also, you can never have enough of.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
You can never have enough vintage athletic apparel. And not only that, vintage athletic apparel that comes from Homage.
That's so true, because, Homage is the most comfortable brand in the land. And, obviously I'm wearing a t-shirt today. That's because it's been beautiful outside. And, I've been wearing a lot of hoodies, but, again, it's warm outside. So if you have been wearing a lot of hoodies and you don't have any, Homage spring apparel, it's time to upgrade your wardrobe. It's time to upgrade your fashion, because Homage is the brand that has you covered in any weather condition. You can rep your favorite teams, pop culture icons, or just your city, and a plethora of different designs. So obviously they have their tees and hoodies that we've been wearing, their long sleeves, but obviously they have awesome t-shirt designs, as well as, sweatpants and shorts. And obviously we're all wearing shorts now because it's nice. And spring and summer are coming, so you got to make sure you get nice breathable shirts for when it's, a humid during those spring days when it's, really rainy and gross outside. And also sometimes, it gets cold in the summer at night, so you have to make sure you still have, a pretty nice setup of, hoodies and long sleeves and sweatpants. And again, Homage is the best place to go for all of that. So if you click the link in the description of this video, or on our Twitter page, you can actually get an awesome link that will take you to Homage, and will let them know that we sent you there. It helps to support us, and it also helps to support Network 216, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, the ad reads just get better each and every time.
I try my best.
But as we're wrapping things up, guys, thank you all that tuned into this episode of the Faithful Dogs podcast. Again, drop a like on that video if you would, please. Again, help push that content out to those who have not yet seen the show. Also, subscribe if you're brand new. Completely free to subscribe to the channel. And again, it helps us a lot, and it's free. So completely free to subscribe. It should be a no-brainer for you. We can't wait to talk to you guys all again soon. And of course, as always, go Browns, baby.
Like, comment, sub. The Brook Park Browns are coming, baby. For sure. They're coming.